Good evening and welcome to the February 4th, can you believe it, February the 4th already, regular meeting of Council, and the City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territories on which we gather with gratitude. Are we fixing it? Okay, no problem, thank you. So, first off, now I'm gone completely, I think, but, pardon? Is that all right? All right. Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations that we adopt the minutes for A, B, and C. Moved by Councillor Chandler, second by Councillor O'Brien, since he had his hand up there. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Approval of the agenda. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the agenda be approved as circulated. Approved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Fraz. And are we all okay with the agenda? There was no changes that resulted in it. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Presentations. We have two presentations tonight. This very ominous gentleman sitting across from me. So, Staff Sergeant, would you please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure being here again tonight. So I've brought the stat sheets for the Oceanside area, which is the first page, is covering the whole, Qualicum, Parksville, and the Neuse. And of course, the second page is strictly the Parksville area. So if we're just going to go through the stats for, let's say, the whole Oceanside area, there's some stuff that we can affect and others we just can't. If you're looking at the assaults, it's more or less the same. There's not much of a change. And in the brackets, that's the actual spousal assaults. So, 52 in 2017, and we dropped to 44 in 2018. What's concerning is the next one right there. If you look at 2016 for the B&E businesses, we jumped from 45, 62 to last year 138. That is huge. So and what we see in that is we've got a lot of we call them the traveling criminals, and they come through our area, they hit a bunch of businesses, and they're out. We got a gentleman the other day on Thursday. He did 3 B&Es in this area, and he got picked off in Nanaimo with stuff from the B&Es here in Parksville. So that's what we're getting. We're getting these guys that are not really organized. They're just traveling through town. Stop, hit a business, hit a house, a residence, and we know nothing about them because we don't know these guys. They're coming in, they're coming out. So, and then if we keep going down, B&E res, it's more or less the same, and there's not much of a change on that. Theft of motor vehicle, again, more or less the same. Theft from motor vehicle, and this is what we're trying to tell the people, do not leave anything in your vehicle. We jumped from 291 in 2017 to 426 theft from motor vehicles here in this area. It's incredible. You just can't leave your cars unlocked and anything in sight. Nothing. No sunglasses, no change, nothing. Because you will get broken into. And same for the theft overs. If you look at 468, 379, and then 505. Shoplifting, more or less the same. Mischief, it's gone up a bit, 356 to 471. So the mischief is also, and that's considered the graffiti. So the graffiti guys, the guys that are out there tagging our businesses, that's part of mischief. That's considered a mischief charge. Mischief residential, it even went down a bit, no real change there. Cause disturbance, only went up about 40, 151 to 195. The drugs, if you look at drugs, you see that went down, and the reason behind that, of course, is we're not charging anybody for marijuana anymore. So it dropped from, 134 to 99. Impaired driving, more or less the same. The IRPs, more or less the same. Liquor act offenses went down a bit. Motor vehicle accidents, which is good because it's been going down every year, 619, 574, and 448. And traffic offenses went up. That's just us giving more tickets because now we've got a 3-man traffic unit here in town. So we're trying to hit as many guys as we can. And if you're speeding, hopefully we're going to get you. Prisoners Lodge, that's the in 2016, we had 343 prisoners for the year. And that's when I arrived. I arrived in the fall of 2016. I just felt that we were letting these prolific offenders weren't being checked, and that's when we started the curfew check program. And that's why you see in 2017 it went up to 412. We were checking 15 to 20 guys a night, and because of that, it's dropped a bit now because we're now down checking to about 5 to 8 guys. A lot of these guys are in jail or they've left town. They just don't want to be checked every night. So they're moving out of town, which is what we want. Nanaimo is beautiful, they can go down there. It's a beautiful city down there. And the RTCCs, that's our report to Crown Council. Again, 450 in 2017 and 421. And again, that's the breach charges because we're having less guys here in town that we're actually breaching. If you're out past your curfew, that's a breach. We will arrest you, we'll charge you, and we'll send you to court. We have less guys that we're checking. But what's concerning is actually the last one, and we go from 12,000 calls in 2016 to more or less 12,000 in 2017, and we hit 14,400 in 2018. So we jump about 2,500 calls for service. But we want the people to call. I want people to call. If you got something in your neighborhood, I want you to call. You got a suspicious vehicle, a suspicious person, call that in. Don't wait till the next morning. We need to call that in right now. We need to get these guys that are out prowling around the neighborhood. So that's why maybe our call volume has gone up. I keep telling people, call it in. No call too small. If we can attend, we will. Okay? And then just on the other sheet, it's just basically the same stats for just the Parksville area. And again, the business B&E, if you look at 2816, there's 18, 31 in 2017, and we jump up to 63. 3 times the amount of B&Es 2 years ago. So that's just huge. That's unacceptable. We want to get these guys in jail, but we can only do so much. We want the businesses, to protect themselves as well. We need videos. We need their alarms going off. Nothing worse than having the owner come in at 8 in the morning and say, I got broken into last night. Okay, what time? Well, let's see your video. Well, I don't got a video. I don't got an alarm. Well, those days again are done. Maybe they ran their business back then like that. Can't do that anymore. We need to be informed right away. If there's a business that's got an alarm, we need to be called right away. And we want the video to actually look at these. Most of these guys we will know unless they're, again, if they're the traveling criminals. There's only so much we can do on that. So, and that's basically it. If you're looking at it's more or less the same stats. It's all gone up. Traffics, the motor vehicle accidents, more or less the same. And it's, like I say, that's just for this area here. So if you're looking again the mischief business and other, again, we jumped from 166 in 2016 to 328 in 2018. It just doubled, eh? And that's the spray painting and just the causing grief in the area. But please, we really want the people here to call us. We want to attend. We want to get these guys in jail, and we want to keep the city clean, and we need your calls.
Thank you, staff. Maybe because the newspaper's here, maybe they'll put that as their headlines. Police want you to call. Please. I agree 100%. We've got to have that happen. Any questions for the Staff Sergeant? Councillor O'Brien. Oh, first.
Thank you very much for your report. Just a question. I'm particularly obviously concerned about the Parksville report here. On the B&E business and B&E residents, they're up considerably, as you've pointed out. Is there a particular, let's look at business right now, is there a particular area or neighborhood, are we talking west side of Parksville, north side of Parksville, or is it, when you call business, is there any pattern that is always happening in a particular area? And I'll ask the same question, is there any pattern with the residents? Is it more closer to town? Is it closer to the outer parts of town? Or is there any kind of pattern that's happening on business and or residents?
So for any business B&E, it's always going to be at night. Businesses run more or less 8 to 4, 8 to 6, somewhere in that area. So it's once they close down. And we're going to see those business B&Es, because we do get the alarms that'll come in and we'll attend right away, 10 o'clock on, 10 to 5 in the morning. That's the key time for do a business B&E. Those guys, they like prowling around, they smash it, it's called smash and grabs. You smash the front window, they grab whatever they can get, and they're out. Most of the residential B&Es, surprisingly enough, it's in the daytime. The one we had here on Thursday, it happened at 1:30 in the afternoon. And that person didn't call until 3:30 in the afternoon. 2 hours later and said, yeah, there was a gray car that just left. Well, yeah, we got that gray car in the 911 now. It would have been nice if you called us 2 hours ago. Could have been in the area. So that's why we want people to call right away. And this was basically a break and enter in progress. Lady came home, buddy boy's going out the back door. Runs to the car. Sees him get in the car. We need the people to call right away. We can't attend 2 hours later. What's the point? You know? So residential break and enters, there's more or less the daytime, or if you're gone, people that are gone on holidays, please have people check your homes. Don't just, go away for 2 weeks and expect to come home and everything's fine. And it's all over. We can't say, oh, it's downtown portion, it's the east end, south end. No. It's just where they drive around and where they see it looks like, oh, that looks like that place is empty. They're going to stop.
Any other questions? Councillor Greer.
Yes, thank you very much for your report. I can see by the stats that break and enters are going up and theft is going up. And I think I've had more complaints since before Christmas this year than ever before, with people complaining about characters on bicycles, looking in windows, going house to house to see what might be available. And I had one lady phone me, much like the story you said, that she came from her living room to her kitchen. There's a guy standing in her kitchen. And she chased him out, and he got in a car that was just at the end of the street. And she didn't phone the police. And so I can see your frustration in that direction. I was wondering whether there is could be more surveillance by police, maybe on bicycles or something to maybe ward off some of these invasions, because I notice lots of kids and characters running around all the time on bicycles too, and people that look like they're looking for things to break into. So I was wondering if you had more visual for the police to show up.
So yes, we do. Like I say, we have an aggressive, we could call them the property crime unit, drug unit. So those guys are in plain clothes. Those are the guys that caught the tagger, the guy that was tagging around all the town. They actually caught him twice in progress. Very hard to get a tagger actually doing it. You'll see him after. You'll see his design or whatever he does there. But to actually catch him in the act is our plain clothes guys. So I don't know if you saw in the paper the other day, the officer that got hurt, chasing some guy that was wanted on warrants, that was a plain clothes officer. So those are the guys that are out there. They know these guys. They're on our list. Those are the guys we check on curfews. They knew he was wanted. They chased after him. And these are the guys that are catching guys. The general duty officer is going to the calls that are going for the break and enter of the business. But the plainclothes guys do not attend any calls. They are always out either doing surveillance or targeting the prolific offenders. They will actually sit on these guys for days on end, hoping that they're going to go and do something.
Is there any thought of bicycle patrol or more situations where people see where you're out there doing your thing?
Yeah, bicycles, we'll be getting them out hopefully in early May, and we'll be out as best we can. In the downtown core and the beach, we're not patrolling on bikes like in the neighborhoods, because you're just too far away. You stay in the downtown core, and we'll deal with the people down in that area there.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Chandler?
Thank you. Great report. Very much appreciate you coming in this evening. One of the things I was going to ask is with the volunteer aspect through Oceanside Community Safety, is there any kind of move towards maybe having bicycle patrols on their side of things as well, even just during the day perhaps? Would that be helpful in any way whatsoever?
Yeah, not an issue for that, for sure. Like, I mean, the more eyes we have, the better it is. You don't even have to be part of that thing. Any citizen, if they see something, please, we tell them, call it in. If you're sitting in your car and you see, "Hey, these two guys are just skulking around on their little BMX bikes, maybe I should call it in." Everybody's got a cell phone. Call in, and the cops will attend. We'll head there. We want to know who these guys are, and we'll check them out, you know.
Just as a follow-up to that, it would be great to see maybe a new crew of volunteers within that organization as well, some younger folks maybe with, bicycle savvy and stuff like that. I think that'd be something that we could, we would love to encourage, and maybe talk to the Oceanside safety guys and have them come in and chat with us.
Not an issue, and I'm a police mountain bike instructor for the RCMP, so I'll train them up. We'll get them going.
Councillor Fraz.
Thank you very much for this report here. One of the things you see an increase in the theft from motor vehicles, and you talk about people having to make sure they have their cars cleaned out and locked up. What kind of public education have you found to be most effective for people to keep this reminder on them? Is it by advertisement in the newspaper? I know you guys have a Safe Smart program, or what other kind of public education do you think would be helpful to remind people of this?
It's basically common sense. Nowadays, you just can't leave anything around like that. You can talk about it till the cows come home, saying that please don't leave anything in your vehicles, and people will leave stuff in their vehicles. You can put it in the newspaper, you can talk on the radio, you can put it on TV every day, and people will leave stuff in their vehicles. My two daughters tell them, remove the stuff in their vehicle. "Oh, Dad, you're such a, oh, Dad," and they leave everything in their vehicles. So I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's like impaired driving. You think impaired driving, we should be done by now? All the advertising we had on that? There should be any drunk drivers on the streets anymore?
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. Appreciate it. Great report. Hopefully next year we'll see it go the other way in a few of those.
Hopefully.
Thank you. Our next presentation, the Director of Finance. Strange enough, he's talking about budget presentations for the RCMP. Coincidental, of course, Mark.
Okay, this is working. Thank you, Your Worship. I put in front of you all a green binder. This has the presentation for tonight in it under RCMP, and also the presentation that will come after this one for solid waste or garbage. So the presentation, the 5-year proposed budget, and the 2019 budget compared to 2018 is all in there under those sections. At the very front of the binder is the tentative budget schedule, and right behind that is some pages where you can jot down if there's items that you would like to discuss at the budget meeting on April the 8th when the consolidated budget will be presented. You could jot those things down, or there's items you maybe want to remove from the budget or items you want to add to the budget. You could jot that down on those pages at the front, and then they'll be easy to reference back to at that later meeting date. Okay. So tonight, first we'll be looking at the RCMP budget for 2019 to 2023. So we came up with this template here on how we will probably be trying to structure all of the budget presentations. With this, we'll discuss the 2019 revenues, the 2019 expenditures, the 2019 revenue and expenditure comparison to 2018, 2018 projects that get carried forward to 2019, and 2019 new spending packages, as well as new costs proposed for the later years of the plan, 2020 to 2023. So the RCMP revenues, we have provincial prisoner cost reimbursement. So this is the detachment here has services Qualicum, Parksville, and the RDN areas around. And so any prisoner who is arrested in the RDN areas, it would be called a provincial prisoner. and the province reimburses us at some minimal dollar amount for those prisoners that are in there, and it totals $17,000 at the end of the year. Traffic fine revenue allocation from the province, we get roughly $100,000 last year. And document services is the things that they do at the RCMP, the services that they sell there, such as criminal record checks. We used to get it for fingerprinting. I think that's the one they took away, or they can't do anymore, or can't charge for it. So there's a number of services that they do there that have fees attached to them, and that totals around $10,000. So the RCMP expenditures, the biggest one is the RCMP contract, $2.2 million. That's for 17 RCMP officers. We pay 70% of their cost, which is $180,700. Now that's not their salary. That's the total cost to outfit an officer, including an allocation of vehicles, their weapons, their jackets, their everything that goes along with an officer in addition to their wages. So we pay 70% of that. And the overtime allowance, there's $164,000 of overtime allowed, and we pay 70% of that as well. The prisoner expenses totals roughly $110,000. As you can see, the province only reimburses us $17,000, and yet I think their prisoner count is probably 40% of the total, so they're really not paying their share. The administrative support, we have 1 QP staff that works for the city and 2.75 public service staff, included in that $507,000, as well as building rental of $200,000. We don't own that building, so we pay a fee for the occupancy of it. And the computer support charge, or LAN services they call them, is $25,400. And the other is for community policing and citizens on patrol and auxiliary police. So this is just, it's a little tough to read, I see. The year-to-year comparison, so as you can see, the budget's going up in the contract amount by $51,000, the administration by $9,400, and the auxiliary policing is a budget that we put in there every second year. We put in an amount, so it was $0 last year and then $1,400 this year. And the revenues have actually gone down a little bit. Part of that is because of the loss in the fees for fingerprinting that we used to get, and also a decrease in the traffic fine revenue. So for the RCMP, there are no carry forwards from 2018 into 2019 for their budget. And there are no new spending packages for the RCMP. And proposed expenditures for 2020 to 2023. For 2022, they're proposing to add 1 additional officer starting April 1st, 2022. The cost of that for 3/4 of a year would be $103,700. That would be our share, and the 2023 for a full year amount, our share would be $142,400. And proposed to add 1 new officer every 4 years thereafter in our 20-year plan. We have a 20-year budget plan, so we try and put in future expenditures all the way through the 20 years on roughly when we think they will occur, so that our 20-year plan lets us see where our reserves are and that we're maintaining adequate reserves throughout our 20 years. So that's why we have that in there for every 4 years thereafter. And that's it for that presentation. Any questions or comments?
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Frass?
Just noticing when you say here that we pay the 70% for those officers, is there a point when that percentage increases for us?
Yes, when we hit 15,000, it will go to 90%, and I believe it's 2034 as our current model is proposing that.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question. Thanks.
We lease the building where the RCMP are now currently. Do we lease it?
Yes, the province, well, I don't know that we lease it because it's, we pay our share of the allocation of it, and Qualicum pays a share, and the province pays their share. And so it's based on the square footage of how much space Parksville is allocated in there.
Just a couple quick questions for then pertaining to that. How long does that lease go for, and who is it with?
I believe the province negotiates that lease with the RCMP, as the RCMP are the owners of that building, or the feds are the owners of the building. So the province negotiates that lease rate, I believe. I'm not sure how long it goes for, though.
Thank you. Oops. One of the points I brought Lucky in this afternoon and had a conversation with him. Why does it appear that we have this jump in expenses between last year's actual and this year's budget? The reality is, just for your own information, is that it's because the staff sergeant does such a great job if he has officers that are off sick, and that we don't end up paying for them. I would assume they get long-term disability or short-term disability for that after 30 days. So those people aren't charged to us. The budget is, but it's still in the budget. We have to assume that next year they'll all be there and keep it going. That's why we see that bump in the. But other than that, it's been relatively flat. 2.3%, I think, is what it is, the total increase of actual spending, if I'm not mistaken.
It sounds about right to me. It's actually, what have I got here? Overall 2%?
Oh, sure, please. I will get.
Just looking at the prisoner expense contract, seems like the province is underfunding that, like $90-some thousand there. Is there any room for negotiating with them or seeing if they would like to up that amount for us? Because yeah, it's quite a difference there.
Well, the province wouldn't have to fund all of it. They would only have to fund their share, proportionate share. So if there's a provincial prisoner in there, say 30% of the time, then they should be funding, in my opinion, 30% of those costs that we're incurring, which are budgeted at $110,000. I'm not sure exactly what their percentage is, but it's somewhere in the 30 to 40% range compared to ours that they have, and we're getting $17,000 out of 110. So the number's a little bit low from what it should be. What they do is they fund us a dollar amount based on how many hours that the prisoners are in there. But if the provincial prisoner is the only prisoner in there, we have to bring in a guard at whatever the rate is, say $30 an hour plus benefits, and pay the full rate. That gets charged to us, and then the province reimburses us at a low amount of $8 or $10 an hour. If we already have one of our own prisoners in there, a Parksville prisoner, and then a provincial prisoner comes in, we still get funded then for all the hours that they're there, but we would have had to have a guard there anyways. So this is the way they look at it and say, well, sometimes we're funding it when your prisoners are there, or if you're at the city in Nanaimo, they've got their guards there all the time. So anytime the provincial prisoner comes in there, it's just a bonus for them because they've probably got prisoners in there 24/7 and guards there 24/7 for their own prisoners. So it's a bonus for them, but for smaller communities like us where you don't have prisoners there all the time, it actually ends up being a cost. So in even a smaller community, say Port Hardy, it would be even a worse situation, I would say.
So everybody that's in there as a prisoner that is not from Parksville or Qualicum Beach is considered a provincial prisoner, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Would it be so much to think that maybe we should ship them to Nanaimo then to their jail? If they're getting paid the same and they have all the expenses, why should we have to incur the excess? In this case, it's what, $23,000 difference. No, God knows if that's even close, but sounds to be right. Why shouldn't we put them into someplace that isn't costing us money? Just a question. Can we do that? Is that feasible? Is it work?
Nanaimo doesn't want our prisoners, I can tell you that right now.
But these aren't our, well, I guess they are ours to some extent. They're from the regional district. All right, so that might be something we want to bring up with the UBCM or somebody saying we need to look at this and get back to it to be in a fair adjudication for it. So, all right, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Now we've got the waste, solid waste.
Okay, this will be under the garbage tag in the binders you have. It's not under solid waste. Okay, so this is the budget presentation for solid waste, and it's almost the same overview, except I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of how the program works for solid waste in Parksville. And then we'll go through the same steps we went through with the RCMP. So the solid waste and recycling pickup and the billing rates are all administered by the RDN and established by the RDN. So we're basically a subcontractor for the RDN for their billing and collections. So we collect the fees on behalf of the RDN. When we do our semi-annual billing for water and sewer, we tack on the garbage charge. And the RDN gives us a 10% discount on the contract price. They also have in their rates, if the person pays before the due date of April 30th, they get a 10% discount. So they pass that discount on to us through a reduction in the garbage charges. And then our administration fees is a further 7.5% discount on the RDN charges for our time of billing and collecting these fees. So the solid waste estimated revenues for 2019 are $819,600. The 10% early discount, about 90% of the people, or 91%, take advantage of that. So that's $73,800. And then garbage bag tag sales, $3 a tag, estimated at $11,400 for 2019, and the revenues, net revenues, are $757,200. And the charge is shown there is $154.03 per residence. So the collection contract costs that the RDN bills us for monthly, there's a 6.4% increase for 2019 and a 2% growth factor. So the cost is $684,200. The garbage tag purchases cost for us is $10,800. Again, we just get a 10% discount on selling those. So that's our profit for running that program. And compared to the revenues, which was $11,400. So we make about $600 for that. And the total expenditures are $695,000. So we put those all together into the 2019 budget. We see from this program we end up with a net profit of around $62,200, and that's just for our labor and postage costs and other things of administering this program on their behalf. So that again, because this is a contract with the RDN, there's no carry forward projects relating to this, and there's no spending packages. And in 2020 to 2023, I understand the RDN is looking at switching to the automated garbage pickup system with the bigger bins that the truck can pick up. and the costs associated with this new system and their impact on the garbage rates. It's my understanding haven't been communicated to us yet. I'm not 100% sure about that. So I don't have any more information at this time on that program or whether it's going to, how it's going to affect rates. But again, this is a contract, and the RDN administers it on behalf of our citizens. And that's all there is for that.
Do I have any questions for the Director of Finance? You must be doing a really good job. You're not getting hardly any questions. Councillor Chandler.
Mr. Mayor, through to Director of Finance. Just a quick question in regards to, when you talk about solid waste, does that also include all the recycling type programs? Is it all encompassed into one?
Yes.
And are we finding the recycling costs are driving things up at all, or is it more the garbage component of it that creates more of the cost?
For 2019, their rates have gone up 6.4%, and most of that is the garbage portion, not the recycling portion. I'm not sure if that's starting to ramp up the rates for the switchover potentially to the automated system. I'm not really sure why the rates have gone up that much. I haven't had a chance to decipher that or talk to anybody about that yet. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Greer is yelling that he has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I saw a program about a week and a half ago on television about separating the garbage. Everybody spends so much time to separate all their garbage and so on. And I think this was in Toronto, where it all went in the same bin at the end of the day. As much as everybody was separating and trying to be very green about this, apparently it all goes in the same area when the garbage truck dumps its load. Do you have any knowledge that we are actually separating all the stuff that we are trying to separate?
Well, the green bin stuff goes in a different bin on the truck, so it is separated from the other stuff, but the rest of it all gets dumped in the same one. Your yellow bag and your blue bin just go into the same compartment, so they do all get mixed. You can watch the truck go by and see how they do it, and it all goes in the same spot. But the green bin stuff does go in a different side, and I've seen it at the transfer station that it's dumped separately as well. So those are kept separate, those ones, but the rest of the stuff in the blue bin and the yellow bag are all just go together.
Yeah, it seemed pretty amazing that everybody's trying the darnest to separate everything and be good stewards, and yet it all goes in the same area at the end of the day. Anyways, thanks.
Councillor O'Brien.
Through the Mayor to the Director of Finance, if I may. Question similar to Councillor Greer. It's not been too long ago since it switched over to the composting, the food waste recovery program that they've done, with obviously the intent to reduce the amount going into the landfill. And that's been going on for a couple of years now that I'm aware of, and yet I've seen no input or actually reports on the amount of compost that's being produced, where's that compost being used. I know in programs in Greater Victoria and Oak Bay, they have actually a compost recovery program where actually they call it black gold, and they sell it to the citizens by the bag, and they line up on Saturdays just to buy the stuff because it's precious material for gardeners. And yet I've heard nothing from the RDN on what actually happens. Maybe it's being used internally or whatever. Can you shed any light as if it's been a successful program? Are they turning it into valuable compost? Is it been polluted by contaminants that don't make it compostable, or how is that working out? Do you have that, or is that going to be a question to the RDN?
That would be a question for the RDN. We're just looking after collecting their money for them and billing it out, so I really don't have any information on that.
Thank you. I'll redirect that question to the RDN. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. So we'll continue on with businesses arising from delegations, Partnership for Water Sustainability in BC, sponsorship for Symposium of Water Stewardship in Changing Times. At our January 21st meeting of Council, we received a delegation from the Partnership of Water Sustainability in BC requesting sponsorship for the second annual Symposium on Water Stewardship in a Changing Climate. This item was being put to Council for consideration of the request for sponsorship. A resolution of Council is required should we wish to provide funding for this event. So they're asking for sponsorship, and it is up to us to decide whether we're going to go. You're making a
No,
motion?
I'm not making a motion. I'm just asking a question here.
Okay, go ahead.
I think, before we have budget talks, I think there has to be some time given. Otherwise, we have organizations coming every week for money, and we have no idea what the budget looks like and whether these should be budget items or not. So I think there should be some greater discussion on this before we make any decisions.
Any other comments? Go ahead. Our acting CAO would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, there is an existing policy on the books where folks who are asking for financial assistance are expected to provide a lot of background information for council. I can certainly circulate that policy to council, but it's something that you could perhaps use to publicly, explain what you're hoping to see from people. It's very similar to what people need to submit for grant and aid. So I can circulate that very quickly to council.
Councillor O'Brien.
And so my question would be at this time is what type of sponsorship amount, what type of cash are they looking for? And as our acting CAO has pointed out, there is a grant and aid process, and the thing is that if these people are looking for some help on this particular thing, the grant and aid process happens twice a year, then I feel that it's really up to them to provide all the information that's required in the grant and aid form so that we have an understanding of what the money is going to be used for, and then we can consider it at that time in a proper format instead of just, here we are, just having a presentation made to us and without any details and so forth. So I would be very reluctant to just carte blanche any approval for sponsorship at this time.
They were here, as I said, on the 21st, and they made a presentation, actually a fairly detailed presentation on what they were looking for. They didn't give us a specific amount. They said, and correct me if I'm wrong, acting CAO, that I think they said Nanaimo donated $2,500 towards this event. Their event is April of this year, and either we'd have no obligation to make a sponsorship bid at this point in time. We can just say no, we're not going to, and if they wish to put it on for next year's budget, then we can consider it at budget time, if that's what we prefer to do. And if that's the case, then if nobody's going to make the motion, then the item dies on the agenda, so to speak. All right? It's an easy way to handle that, unfortunately. All right, correspondence. We have one piece of correspondence tonight. Coldest Night of the Year request to waive special event deposit requirements. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Pardon me, I'm sorry. No, if we don't have a mover and a seconder, we can't go any further, so. Okay, so we're not hearing that. Go ahead. You're allowed.
Instead of the recommendation here, I'd actually like just to move that we refuse the request for waiving the refundable damage deposit for this event.
I need a seconder by Councillor O'Brien. Do we, if I may, for just a second, I don't believe we even need to go, if we don't bring it up, then it's the same thing as saying what you're saying, is it not? We just don't need to do anything. Yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, if you want to keep going. Okay, please feel free.
So just like Council know, I did reach out to Arnaldo, the event coordinator, for this to speak, asking him as to some reasoning behind why they were asking for this refundable damage deposit to be waived. In talking to him, it didn't seem it was clear to him that it was a refundable deposit. It seemed like they assumed it was a fee that was being charged, and so they're asking for support. So I wanted them to know that my position is not that it's a refusal of supporting them, but this is the only event that I'm aware of that has any request to be waived for the deposit, and I think the deposit is an important part of the policy we have in place for events. So rather than applying special treatment to one group, I think we should be fair and equitable to all of them, asking that they maintain the policy as it is, particularly because it is refundable as well. So it's not at any expense to them in line with this policy. So after having that conversation with him, he seemed more comfortable with understanding that position. So I thought I'd share that with you guys.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Good. Mr. Dawson, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding emergency program updates?
Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about emergency management Oceanside, which is the emergency program for Qualicum Beach, City of Parksville, and electoral areas E, F, G, and H. There you go, I got it right. Okay. So we're going to give you a complete overview of everything that's involved with the program. I will go through some of the things a little quickly, but hopefully I'll get all the messaging in there. Please ask me questions at the end. So who are we? My name's Aaron Dawson. I am the emergency coordinator for the City of Parksville, and I've been the full-time emergency coordinator since the beginning of 2017. With me tonight is Rob Damon from the town of Qualicum Beach. He's the full-time emergency coordinator for the town of Qualicum Beach. And I've also invited Chris James to come with us tonight. Chris is our volunteer coordinator, and he is paid under contract, which is a contract that is shared between the three local governments. None of the two ladies from the regional district were available to come tonight. So what starts off the emergency program? So the Provincial Emergency Act says, pardon me, requires a local government to have an emergency program and all the bits and pieces that go with that. The bits and pieces are what are under the Emergency Act regulation, and it talks about needing to provide people with the basics being food, lodging, and clothing when they are displaced from their homes. Other aspects of the emergency program are covered off in the emergency program bylaw for the city. That bylaw has been around since 2006, and we would like hopefully to come in front of council this year with an updated bylaw that would more reflect changes in what's happening in the world and changes in how we do business now versus how we did business in 2006. So components of an emergency program, there are 4 pillars. The first 2 pillars are mitigation and preparedness. So when we mitigate, we plan, we work with the different departments. Mr. Russell from the planning department, the director of planning, he does a great job of working with his building inspectors and looking at land use to ensure that houses will, and businesses and buildings will stay up, they will meet standards that need to be met, and they're not in places that are in danger. And that's how we work together in all the different departments to make sure that we are doing things in a safe way for everyone. Preparedness, we identify the hazards. That's a hazard risk vulnerability assessment, or HRVA, that we undertake. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that after. But that sets out the different hazards that apply to the local area, what we refer to as District 69, that encompasses the electoral areas Qualicum and Parksville. So when we look at those hazards, we can then start to look at what the effects or consequences of those hazards are on all of our infrastructure, everything to do with the city, and how we can protect that infrastructure so when the hazard occurs, it's less destructive. We spend a lot of time doing public outreach. We get out and we talk to as many people as possible. We try to educate as many people as possible so that when something does happen, like simply the power outage from the windstorm we had before Christmas, it's not as all-encompassing, it's not as horrible for people, because they've learned how to survive and live without those things until they can be restored. We spend also a lot of time training staff, because it's the staff that make up our support. They staff our emergency operations center. They, on the ground crews, they look after what we need them to look after. So we need to give everybody some training in order to be able to understand, the decisions that are being made in an emergency operations center and what we're asking them to do. Chris looks after volunteer recruitment and training. I'm going to talk more about volunteers and Chris later, but that is a huge part of our program. You will see as we move through this where we save a considerable amount of money by using volunteers and how special those volunteers are for us. The last two parts of the 4 pillars are response and recovery. That's where you see the rubber hit the road. When we respond, it's because any first responder group needs help. They don't have capacity any longer to look after a situation on their own, and they look to us for resourcing. Staff Sergeant Pelletier, who was here earlier to talk to you, he was the first person that called us on December the 20th and activated us because he was about to close Highway 4. That's when we needed to step in and start looking after people. When we do responses properly and we follow the proper rules and regulations through the Emergency Act, all of our reasonable and approved response costs are 100% refundable to the city. So that's a big help to us. So when we learn how to do that properly, which we know how to do, we don't have extra costs to support our residents. Under recovery is what we have to do to get back to, perhaps the best words are, the new normal. So in order to get back to the new normal after something happens, there can sometimes be costs associated to that, like repairing a broken pipe as a result of an earthquake, for instance. If we have a plan in place, which we are working towards now, and we submit that to the province when something happens, the province will pay 80% of those recovery costs. To finish off with the components of an emergency program, it's like a puzzle, and you'll see the little design that we found and made up. The province has hired a whole bunch of people in the last 2 years. The response and the support we're getting from the province has improved immensely. We continue to work hard to develop what we need to develop as a local government that we're required to do, and we work hard also to train and educate our residents to look after themselves. If all 3 of those pieces of the puzzle work, then the whole system will work, and we will recover and we will get back to that new normal faster. As soon as one of those parts isn't prepared, it takes much, much longer to recover from any incident that happens. So as I've kind of described already, excuse me, the purpose of what we do for the emergency, with the emergency or as the emergency program, is first and foremost we support our first responders. When they run out of resources to help you, we help them help you. Secondly, after they've done their job as the first responders, we come in behind and we care for you. So when you look at our priority response goals, which are supplied to us by the province, we make sure it's safe for the first responders so they can save lives and we can help reduce suffering. Then the remaining things there happen in that order but almost simultaneously. So we try to put everything back into place as best we can as quickly as possible. When we talk about reducing suffering, we're not talking about the fact that you don't have internet anymore. Suffering really means that you don't have food, you don't have a home or shelter, and you don't have clothes. And I talked about that very briefly already, that those things are what we provide on behalf of the province. Why we do it, the best way I can describe that is a couple of months ago I was watching something on public television regarding the earthquake in Alaska in 1964. And what many people talked about from that event was that there was nothing in place to support them once the earthquake had happened. And because there was nothing in place, many, many people moved away and never went back. So if we can put the right things in place to support our residents and get everything back to normal as quickly as possible, then our new normal can look like the normal we have now, rather than a much reduced community. And we all kind of like the communities that we have here now. What are the emergencies? Well, there's 57 of them that the province has identified can happen anywhere in the province. So when we studied that in 2009, there were 18 of those 57 hazards can happen here. We are in the process of working with the regional district and the town of Qualicum Beach for a new comprehensive hazard risk vulnerability assessment list. It's about halfway through now. It's all done under a grant, well, 90% of it is done under a $150,000 grant that we received from the federal government. And there will be, in the budget proposal, there is a little bit of money to top that up that we're asking for. So you'll see that, hopefully that will explain what we're asking for when you see it in the budget proposal. Currently, and it's looking that way through the first portions of the HRVA assessment we're doing now, is earthquake, interface, fire, and pandemic are our top three. And we know that that's true in this area. We've felt earthquakes, we've had tsunami warnings. This last summer was almost unprecedented for the amount of forest fires that happened in the north end of the island. Pandemic, you just have to think back to H1N1 that scared everybody and happened here. So these things are qualified by reality. And the extreme weather event, which is also on the list, happened on December the 20th. So these things actually do happen, and we do respond to them, and we do our best to help everybody. So what about you folks? So if you were required, if we set up an emergency operations center, you would be required, and you would be working with the acting CAO, or acting CAO, whatever the case is, whoever that person at the time is. In this case, Kiva would be briefing you, telling you what is happening on the ground, telling you what we are going to be looking for, excuse me, and asking you to approve certain things or consider approving certain things. With the province, although they will pay 100% of the response costs, we as the local government have to pay them up front first, and then they reimburse them. So where the current bylaw says that there is $250,000 at the CAO's expense to support these things, anything special that maybe the province wouldn't approve, like someone wants to get up in a helicopter and have a better look at something and the province decides you don't need that, that's where you as council would have to make a decision on paying that cost. The only thing that council, that staff cannot do is, and the biggest reason why we need council, is for a state of local emergency. If we need to declare a state of local emergency to gain up to 9 powers, including evacuating, access to property, fixing costs, we would need to come to you as council with the paperwork and ask you to approve that so it can be sent to the province. So you do play a very important role. You're not directly in the Emergency Operations Center or EOC, but you play a very, very important role. So what infrastructure and resources do we have currently? Well, there's 3 identified emergency operations centers in District 69. One of them is the town of Qualicum Beach Fire Hall. One of them is this room right here. Pardon me, it converts over. These desks all move. They move to where we need them to be. And the Regional District Board Chambers is the third one. We do have everything portable, so if none of those buildings were available, we could find a portable location to go to. We do have 7 reception centers where we ask affected residents to go to get support. We have 7 of those locations across the region. Starting at the Coombs Legion, we go to the Lighthouse Community Center. There is the Coombs Fairgrounds. There's the Civic Center in Qualicum Beach. Here in Parksville, there's the Baptist Church on Pym Street. And then our home location where our volunteers work out of is the PCC, which is also a reception center for residents of Parksville. Finally, the last one is what is it called down in the news? Nanoose Place. Thanks, guys. Nanoose Place is the 7th. You can see that we have a reasonably robust amount of volunteers. 64 volunteers is pretty significant for any emergency program. We are, because of Chris's hard work, we are quite well respected for the size of program we have, but I can tell you now that that's not enough. If we had we need about 11 people for a reception center? Give or take, yeah, 11 people for a reception center. So if we had to man 7 reception centers, we're already out of people. So Chris works really hard. We work with him. It's a great number. It's not enough. You can see from the photo attached there, pardon me, that is essentially our 8th reception center. It's mobile. We can take it where we need it. If a community is affected and it's easier for us to take a reception center to the community than bring a community to us, it's full of tables, chairs, tents, and all the paperwork necessary to help displaced people. What else do we have? We have what's in the photo there. We have an emergency communications trailer. We have short, medium, and long-range communications ability. We also have the ability to send email over those radio waves when there are no other forms of communication available. Well, they'll happen anyway, anytime, but they're especially useful for us when no other forms of communication are available. We have one mobile pet trailer. That pet trailer is new to us, and we learn from every event that happens. 2 years ago, we had an apartment fire here, and Rob and I were left with pets when the fire chief, Mark Norris, turned to us and said, "We got 9 cats, ready to go, guys?" That was a hard moment for us. Right? Rob, you had 2 cats at home for overnight? Yep. What we did was we looked at what would be useful for us, and we looked at what was available outside of the community, and we found a UVCM grant for $25,000. We have that pet trailer now. We can service people and their pets because pets are part of the family, and some people don't want to leave if their pet can't go. So people will avoid support because their pet won't be supported. Now we can do that. So all in all, the pet trailer, after you subtract the $25,000 grant, you subtract GST, you're left with about $1,900. I'm looking at Kiva just to see if I got my numbers right. So it costs the community $1,900 for an almost $30,000 trailer. So we got that in place. We got something to support the communities and at a good value. Now, in order to move all that stuff around, we do have 2 vehicles. Qualicum has a vehicle. Parksville has a vehicle. We need to be able to move supplies, people, and our trailers depending on what's happening. And what events like the apartment fire and the storm on December 20th showed us is that when the fire departments are all fully activated, there is no other trucks or apparatus available to help us. So now we can look after ourselves and we can be where we need to be. We do have, as part of what we consider our resources and infrastructure, we have our neighboring local governments and regions. We all work as what is referred to as the Mid-Island Emergency Coordinators and Managers, or MIECM group. It's a group of professionals like ourselves. We meet every 2 months. We look at how we can support each other and what we can do to make things better so that the whole island recovers faster in a large-scale event. Then we have the highly trained and respected staff. I've talked about Chris already. Chris, Rob, and I have all been tapped by the province to deploy to different parts of the province to support different things happening. Chris has been to both Frechette and wildfires. I've been to Kamloops for Frechette, and Rob's been to, you just been for wildfires in 2017. And what's great about that is we get to go away. The province supports us and pays for us to go, and we get to learn and support somebody else and bring that expertise back to the community. So the province has already talked to Chris about volunteers and himself, their availability to go and help for what's expected to be another hot, fiery summer. So let's talk about the volunteers for a minute. Back when I came here in 2006, I think for the first few years, we were hard pressed to get a response, to have a situation come up where they needed an emergency program to support the event. What's happened as we've grown through the whole region is to the point where last year we had 19 events. 18 of those, I believe, were just house fires. 19 were house fires, so then I should be saying 20 if I want to include the response for the windstorm. So our volunteers are awesome. We train them, we work with them. They are so eager to help and learn. They're available 24/7, 365 days a year. They will go to support anybody, anytime, day or night. The two bolded numbers that you see there, the donated hours by our volunteers, we track when we have them sign in and sign out of any kind of training, meeting, exercise, whatever event it is. And we know our volunteers put in more hours than that. That's almost 4,000 hours that our volunteers have donated to the public. Based on, as you can see there on a 2015 value from EMBC, that's almost $72,000 that the volunteers have saved the communities. And we think they're worth a whole lot more than that. So I want to talk about the storm for a minute, just to try and tie some of it all together for you. We did open a small emergency operations center, and we did activate a reception center on the night of the storm, and it was, as I said, Staff Sergeant Pelletier who alerted us. Rob and I talked back and forth all day, but it wasn't until Staff Sergeant Pelletier phoned me that we knew something had to happen. And he phoned because he was about to close the highway. Well, it wasn't him that closed it, it was all the trees that fell across it that closed it. But he was letting us know that no one was getting through there anymore. So working with the province, we ended up referring 56 people for accommodation that night, which meant that we ran out of hotel rooms in Qualicum, Parksville, and we're shipping people for accommodation into Nanaimo. And Nanaimo was running out of hotel rooms for that night because they also had issues of their own, and there were issues in the south end of the region. Pardon me. So that was a lesson to us. We've always talked about the summertime being the worst time for a large event to happen, not considering that a lot of people come here for Christmas as well, and a lot of hotel rooms were already booked at Christmas time. You can see there that that event alone, the volunteers put in 108 hours of service. Rob ran the reception center / warming center for the days that it was available, providing what you see there. It was interesting to see how many people came to get water, come and have a shower, and interesting to me that they wanted power to charge their devices. We were very lucky in this event that we still had cell towers working, and we still had the internet service. So that's how people were learning about when they would get their power back, by keeping their devices charged. Pardon me. We learned that we were open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. We could have been open a few hours longer, to support people, because what they were saying is that people working different shifts could have used a little bit of heat in a shower, and they could have also just stayed warmer a little bit longer before they went to their cold homes, because a lot of those homes were out of power for a week, 2 weeks. My home personally, I was without power for 4 days. So in total, 336 residents used that warming center. That told us that that was the right thing to do. And you can see from the little snapshot that's beside there, that's from the Hydro website. That's where all the power outages were, and I think that's when some of the power was starting to come back on. So you can see how extensive an area was affected. A couple of things that, other things that we learned, we don't have any group lodging capability in this area. And what that is when we run out of hotel rooms, what are we going to do with people to offer them a place? Because that's the obligation, is the food, the shelter, and the clothing. So the shelter part, we are going to be looking at what grants are available to obtain group lodging supplies, being cots, blankets, pillows, that kinds of thing. And we've asked Chris to look at the different reception centers we have. We can convert them over to warming centers or group lodging centers. What are the best ones, and how much supplies do we need? So again, we're going to be looking at grants, UBCM grants coming up again, to see if we can take advantage of those for that. Two things that we haven't figured out what to do with yet was, we realize now that when the power's out, none of the fuel stations can pump fuel. When we did our debrief with the first responder groups, that became an issue for them. Some of the fire apparatus were running around with fuel tanks that were getting rather frighteningly low, and there was no easy way to get them fuel. It's something that we'll have to look at. And secondly, when the power went out in the outlying areas, and Rob, you can confirm this if I got this right, people came in and stripped the quality foods in Qualicum, pretty much empty shelves, bare shelves. So we know that there's only a 3-day supply of food on Vancouver Island at any time, but if there's a rush on that, that will lower that from 3 days to whatever that's going to be. To work from what we've been saying about being a respected group, for what we've created here in this area, during the storm, I received an email from the province, from EMBC. They were looking for us to support the Tayshat First Nation. They needed to evacuate some people. They had an even more interesting time in the Alberni Valley. They had the same windstorm problems, but they also had flooding problems, and they had a bomb scare all on the same day. So they were looking to get people out of the Alberni Valley and chose us. So we were ready to help them. Thankfully, once the highway was open, then all of the transient people were able to leave, and that took care of the hotel problem, so the people could stay in Port Alberni. But we did find the capacity to help with Tayshat. So I hope that was a lot of information all at once. I hope that I gave it to you in a way that was understandable. We're here for questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have maybe a suggestion or a thought about homeowners offering their homes in times of emergency, if there's a list that you might have for that sort of thing.
Thank you for that. We did talk about that. Excuse me, we've talked about having two boards in a warming center or a reception center, one with government information on it and one where people can put what they want on it. Because there are liability issues around people offering up their homes to strangers. And so if we allow people to do that on their own, we don't get tied into that if something goes wrong. And so for the next time we have to do something like this, that is a consideration, absolutely.
Councillor Press.
Well, thanks, Aaron and Rob and Chris, for coming out for the presentation. And I think that's a lot of work you guys put in there, and I'm really happy to see that pet trailer. I think that's a great consideration and wonderful that you guys were able to do that. The question I have is, because emergencies can be so varied, of course, you're not always just thinking about when you initiate one plan, it can be many plans. How do you communicate with the public as to what they should be doing when an emergency happens? Because there's not always going to be the same course of action for them to take.
Great question. To my left, the wonderful Deb Tardif. She is our go-to person. We've called Deb at 2 in the morning. We rely on Deb to get our messaging out, and Rob and I, through that storm event, we talked regularly, daily, and we decide early enough in the day what messaging we needed to go out. We would draft something, send it to Deb so she could make it usable to the public. She would clean it all up for us, and so that goes out through, and correct me now, Deb, if I missed something, but there's all 3 government websites. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, massive distribution to all media outlets, and as an outcome from the storm event, what we have chosen to do is the first responders, like the fire chiefs, staff Pelletier, the ambulance superintendents, we're including them now, because one of the things that we found is it was confusing. A lot of the first responders didn't know where to send people. So if we include the first responders in that messaging, then hopefully we won't, we're all on the same page moving forward. Is that answering your question?
You may.
Yeah, I guess, that answers that there's many different ways out there. So I know it's a challenging kind of question to ask. The other one being, what kind of time frame are you guys prepared for? If you have an evacuation of the community, if there was a fire, for example, how long are you guys prepared for an emergency to happen for the community?
I want to say as long as it takes. I'm not 100% sure of the question in terms of...
Okay, so I'll just add on there, like you mentioned, it's important that the community gets back together quickly so that it's not a ghost town where people don't come back to. What kind of time frame do you expect it to be? Is that 2-week window that you try to get things back, or is it a 3-month window? Or
It really depends on what happens. In an earthquake, it's going to take a long time to come back to normal. If it is a wildfire, it could be only as long as it takes to have the risk of that fire leave the area, and then whatever it takes to get do an inspection of all the facilities and the homes, and then restock grocery stores, because we don't need people coming back. We don't want people coming back to empty shelves. That's not productive. So, if we could do that, how long did it take in Williams Lake, Rob?
In a matter of days, we were going through Williams Lake, doing the entry assessments. Through the assessment of all the picture shows, we provide emergency support to these individuals, hospital services, and the essential services of restaurants and food that we would help back into a property on the days. So with the fires,
Any other questions? Thanks an awful lot. Oh, do you? Sorry.
It's going to leave some room for other people, but one of the other things I've seen happen through emergencies, and I'm wondering how prepared you guys are for it, is things like looting that comes on afterwards. Like, we always think about the emergencies and restocking the shelves, but the people that take advantage of others in those situations, do you guys have a plan in place with the RCMP to?
We have spoken to the RCMP, even back with he's Inspector now, Staff Sergeant Hunter at the time, and we talked with them, and we've been talking to Staff Sergeant Pelletier in the same vein too, of how they would deploy staff in a evacuated neighborhood. Yes, it's been accounted for.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Aaron, Chris, Rob, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very good. I'm pretty familiar with your program, just been involved in a couple of things. And I think one thing I know as councillors, we all would like to publicly thank the volunteers within your program too. I mean, that's certainly a big component of your success in the program. And so we'd like to make sure you pass that on if we could. In addition to that, I wondered a while back, and we discussed this during a training session, that if we could see some sort of layout as to what is your plan in the event of an earthquake, which would be a catastrophic event for us. Ultimately, roads will be closed, diesel fuel won't be available, and those kind of things, ramp up by 100, obviously, and you know that. But I guess it would be really interesting to, just so we're aware of what to expect, we would appreciate something like that. I think I'm just speaking for myself, but thank you.
We are hoping to approach council on some more in-depth information and perhaps even training at a later date, but that will come through Kiva to you. But yes, we'd like to share all that with you, absolutely.
Okay, in an attempt to move it along, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It was a great presentation, very informative. In fact, we were talking about it this morning, and so very timely from that perspective. Thank you. Mr. Russell, would you please give us a background on the issues regarding consideration of a development permit to facilitate a 4-story rental apartment building at 155 Molliet Street North?
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. For council consideration this evening is a development permit, as you described, for the 4-story, 74-unit apartment building. The building is within the multi-unit and intensive residential development permit area number 4. This development permit area is to facilitate the form and character of the building and landscaping. The building itself has been designed by a registered architectural firm, and the landscaping has been designed by a landscape architect. There's some sustainability features that are outlined in the report, and as well as landscaping bonding is included. In staff's review of the application, it appears in general compliance with the development permit area guidelines, and it's for council consideration of issuance this evening.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Chandler, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Any discussion? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few things about this project, given that it was not reviewed by the advisory design panel. I just wanted to make a few suggestions or comments on this. One of the things that I notice is that there's a considerable amount of parking that is allotted for on the lot. So one of the questions I would, or one of the considerations would be, would they consider full basement parking, which would allow for free up a bit more green space and amenity space for children and pets. And I also, looking at the plan, wondered about whether there's sufficient storage in the parkade units themselves. And as far as the attention to energy conservation, something that I think would be nice to see going forward would be more consideration towards greenhouse gas emissions and things that could go towards climate change. Solar ready might be one of the things. Electric car charging stations, perhaps recycle rainwater for irrigation, a few things like that. The same developer had a project which is, I think, given a development permit on this adjacent lot at 119 Molliet. And they, after going through a advisory design panel review, they actually did come back and make changes to the plan. Some of them, which is actually kind of nice. They added landscaping on the corner to screen the backyards. They also incorporated privacy screening between the units. On the townhouses, there wasn't any. And they also incorporated a rough-in electrical vehicle chargers within the development. So Those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment, basically. Just wanted to say that obviously these kind of developments are very much needed in our community, and I like to see that they're moving forward. I totally appreciate where Councillor Wilson has some comments there, and I do appreciate those comments. I think that there's some good things that can be done. Just want to make sure that we don't slow down the process for these events, and want to make sure that everything moves forward as quickly as possible, but with some good considerations as put forward by Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Mr. Russell, would you please give us a background on the issue regarding the advisory design panel mandate confirmation?
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. The term of the last advisory design panel lapsed in December 31st of 2018. And so now is time for the new council to consider going forward whether or not to renew the terms of reference for the advisory design panel, and if they are renewed, for staff to be directed to proceed with advertising to solicit membership for the panel. In the report, it provides detail on how business has been conducted to date with respect to design panel. It highlights how the terms of reference actually spell out how that is conducted, and there's three options provided in the report, although there are other options available as well, and the recommendations are as per the agenda. If council wishes, I can provide a brief presentation showing just a couple comparisons if that's of interest, or after your discussion at your pleasure, Your Worship, just let me know.
Thank you. All right, so I've been advised that we may want to break these up into 3 different sections. So let's start with the first one, to receive the report. I have a motion to receive. Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in favor of receiving? I need a mover and a second for the second recommendation to renew the ADP mandate. That the advisory council mandate be renewed for a current term of council based on the terms of reference attached in Schedule A. Councillor Wilson is making the motion. Are you seconding? Councillor Patterson is seconding. Discussion. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This council, I think, came out at the start to try to make life a little easier for staff. So I have an amendment to this motion, but I'll just speak to it first. I believe council is capable of assessing whether a proposal meets the development permit guidelines. All buildings are designed by a registered architect, and we have the guidelines in front of us when making decisions whether to issue the permit. If council as a body is not satisfied with the appearance of the building or the siting of the amenities, we can refuse to issue the development permit and advise the landowner of the deficiencies. Council has the ability to require changes without an ADP making recommendations to that effect. With that, I would like council to direct staff to abolish the advisory design panel.
Are you making an amendment? You can't make an amendment to that. We have to vote this one down before you, if you were going to do that. Okay,
that's the amendment.
No, you can't make an amendment.
Okay.
You can't make amendment on
all
that.
Right.
That amendment on this. It's not
all right.
It's not small enough. Okay, so what we'd have to do is vote against this particular amendment, if that were the case. Sorry. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
I'm not really sure if I want to speak to the second recommendation or to Councillor Greer's next motion that he's putting on the table, but from someone who's served as the liaison in the past to the advisory design panel, they are a wealth of information. I'm hoping that Councillor Wilson will echo that sentiment, but if you ever have the chance to attend one of these meetings, it is really a good opportunity. They lend a great deal of knowledge and suggestions to a developer that we as a council are not in that position to make. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
At this point in time, I think it would behoove us to, as a relatively new council, is to at least give the advisory design panel a chance to actually prove itself as to what they're capable of doing. And obviously they proved a very successful pattern in the past for moving projects along. And the thing is that I think that I would like to see their performance for at least a 1 to 2 year period before I consider even abolishing them, because I understand what they've done and what they're capable of doing, and maybe there's some tweaking to make sure that their program works in a little more time-efficient manner, and maybe they could use some help with that regarding whether they need a 3-person quorum or whether they need more time to prepare this. But I believe as far as being a tool to be used anyways, maybe we could tweak that a little bit, whereby as the design panel may not necessarily be needed to be used for all developments such as what happens up in the industrial park, but anything other than that, I think that their services would be really appreciated, because we've got a couple of really big issues coming up, as we know, in the next 2 years that is going to be happening in our community here. And so I think I'm going to give them a chance to prove their stuff, because I really value their input.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally agree with Councillor Patterson or Councillor O'Brien. Director Russell and myself had a long chat today about this. We're still on item number 2, I believe. All right. Well, I have a few things to say later on, but I just wanted to say that they are a very important body, and I don't think as council members, new council members coming in, we have that background to start making decisions without that extra backup. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'm going to wade in on the conversation. I have sat on the advisory development planning committee, and so I know how it works. First thing is that they're way off track in many cases as to what their responsibility is. The responsibility is for development permits. Most of what Councillor Wilson brought to the table would be similar to what you'd get from the ADP, and virtually none of that has anything to do with development permits. Development permits are dictated by the Municipal Act. It's very clear and very precise as to what you can and you cannot do, and what you can and cannot approve in the development permit process. So, you know, from that perspective, if you could bring them into just doing development permit applications the way they're supposed to be done, quite frankly, if you do that, you don't need them. Because at the end of the day, our staff, we have an excellent, probably the best I've worked with across the country. We have one of the best planning departments I've seen, and those people are able to go through this just as well as anybody to go through it. All the plans in the downtown core must be designed by an architect. The landscaping has to be done by a landscape architect. They're done professionally. They're done the way they're supposed to be done. By referring these projects to the ADP, we're going against what most of us, in fact, I'd be willing to bet all of us said, was that we were against slowing projects down. We wanted to move them through the process. We campaigned to cut costs for developers where we could, to cut the bureaucracy. This is a form of bureaucracy in my mind. This slows the project down, it increases the costs, and all of the recommendations that come from the ADP are cost increases that may or may not be required. Staff knows what has to be done. They can tell the developer what needs to be done. I'm sorry, but I'm opposed to this. Having the ADP, I was 10 years ago, I still am. I still haven't seen what they bring to the table that staff can't do, and what, at the end of the day, what council can do. We can look at a building and decide whether we like it or we don't like it, and that's really all it comes to. You can talk about the elevations on the building. You can talk about the site plan as to where the driveways are, where the doors are. You can talk about the landscaping to a certain aspect, but you can't get down to saying, I want 3 plants of these and 2 plants of those. You know, when you're doing a development permit, that's not the spot for this. We are getting this mixed up as to what it really is. Development permits should be a relatively easy process to go through. It's to start the whole package. Anyways, I've said enough. Thank you very much. And any other questions, I'd be glad to take them. All those in favor? Number 2, the motion that you put on. All those in favor, saying that you're in favor of that the advisory design plan be renewed for the current term of council. So you're going to put them out for 4 years, or 3 more years, or 2 years, no. Okay, so you want to go out for 2 years then, for the current, all right, that's fine. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. What is it? Okay, I assumed that once we did number 2, then the process would go on normally. So we don't need number 3 or number 4, do we?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would like to get direction for 3 and 4. And if there are any amendments, it would be advisable to read them separately.
Okay, number 3, that the staff be directed to proceed with advertising for potential candidates to fill vacancies on the advisory design panel and report to council with recommendations on appointments. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, number 4. Need a mover and a seconder that the staff only refer development permit applications to the advisory panel where so directed by formal resolution of council. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Wilson. Are you
Sorry,
moving?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make an amendment, and I didn't know when I was.
Okay, but are you moving the number 4? Yeah, okay. It's seconded by Councillor Fraz. All right, now you can do what you want to do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that staff maintain the status quo with regards to development application referrals as to the ADP, and that staff be directed to develop a referral criteria for council consideration. Would you like me to explain that further?
Please.
If I may, Mr. Mayor. Council could agree that that would be a friendly amendment, but if not, it would be advisable to vote on 4 as is, and then if Councillor Wilson's motion would be agreeable to council, they would vote on that after. I think what Councillor Wilson is doing is proposing an alternative number 4. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Director Russell and I spoke and kind of got some guidance on that as it is, projects go right now to the advisory panel. And the idea being that if staff were to develop a referral criteria for council consideration, that might be changing the terms such as the industrial area not needing it, or coming up with other solutions that wouldn't hold up projects, and only certain projects would have to go through. I think along that, is that correct, Director Russell?
Hold on for a second. The motion on the floor has to be defeated before we can go on any further on this. Yes, that's where I'd like to go.
So the motion on the floor is that staff for further development permit application only at the resolution of a council. Could we include with that, could we make an amendment to it that it is accompanied by a referral process so that we have some guidance onto what would be appropriate for it? Could we make an amendment to that as it is?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Frass. If council agrees that would be a friendly amendment, then yes, you can vote on that. We can amend it and vote on it under this motion.
Are you amending?
I would like to make that amendment then.
I need a seconder for the amendment. Seconded by Council. Sorry, this button thing is driving me crazy. This is only on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to Acting CAO Kiva Keller, just want to make sure that what Councillor Fraus said is basically what I'm trying to do.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Wilson, it sounds like he is proposing a friendly amendment, just reworded it so that it was in line with what the motion is.
Right. Thank you.
Hitting it. All those in favor of the motion as amended? Opposed? It's carried. Mr. Russell, you've got us all going here on this. Would you please give us the background issue regarding consideration of the amended development permit to facilitate non-permanent sales office at 100 Lombardy Street?
Sure, if I may, Your Worship. It's a fairly basic building, a fairly basic application. In order to sell the units in the building, the main building, the apartment, mixed-use commercial building, the proponent has found a need to have basically a sales office type showroom building on the property to garner interest in the building. And so for Council's consideration this evening is a development permit amendment that facilitates just that.
Thank you. I need a motion moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Chandler. Discussion. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to our CEO and then probably to our Director of Planning. Is that why the sales office has kind of stopped being built at this time because it required authorization through council?
If I may, Your Worship, that is correct, as well as a building permit.
Follow up?
So, not that I want to be facetious or anything, but shouldn't our developer have known that he couldn't have started the sales building?
If I may, Your Worship, I think there may have been some confusion with respect to that with this particular property.
Any other conversation? I have a couple of questions, if I may. First off, at some point in time in the near future, I would certainly like to look at the requirement of having to get a development permit for a temporary building such as a sales office. Seems like we're creating, again, going back to that whole conversation of bureaucracy. We got something sitting on blocks that we need a development permit for. That's the first item. Secondly, on a development permit for a temporary building, why do we need $56,968 in deposits for landscaping?
If I may, Your Worship, that is the landscaping for the permanent building. So for the permanent multi-story building and its landscaping, that's what that dollar amount is for. That you'll notice in the permit that the wording expressly exempts the building permit for this temporary building, and actually it's at the time of building permit issuance for the main building. That's when the landscaping security would be due.
That I'm not understanding why it's even in this part of the discussion. There should be a development permit for the building as a whole, should there not, instead of being in here? It's just very confusing.
If I may, Your Worship, basically the amended permit, the whole permit's being reissued with the amendment to it. So because the whole original building and landscaping is in that permit, it still needs to be covered off, if that makes sense.
Okay, we'll let that one go for this time, but I certainly want to have this conversation in the near future about it. Councillor Patterson.
Just one other question for clarification. The sales building, do we know how long it will be erected for?
If I may, Your Worship, it's actually a term of the permit that 2 years from the issuance of its building permit that it is to be removed.
Councillor Chandler.
Just a comment. This is, I believe, a local developer that's managing this build, and I think it's just great to see that actual property being developed. I mean, I think I praise everybody for getting it rolling here. This is awesome. So that's my comment.
It will certainly make a difference to that corner. All right, Councillor Patterson.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
Just a comment on this developer. If you do have a chance to, I think it should still be in archives when they made their presentation, and that they used a drone to showcase the building height, what it looked like from different areas, the traffic coming and going from the area. It was one of the best presentations I've ever seen.
Good to know. All right. No other questions? I will call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll turn our attention to the Director of Engineering. Would you please give us the background on the issue regarding Moss Avenue water main design and construction, Craig Street to McKillop Drive?
If I may, Your Worship, before Council is a report requesting the award of professional services for the design and construction services for the construction of 215 meters of water main and associated connections on Moss Avenue to Newcastle Limited and Napa Industries, respectively. Staff's request the water main and design and construction work be sole sourced to the respective engineer of record and contractor just named for the 151 Despard Avenue development currently underway. The development is already responsible for sanitary and storm main upgrades on Moss Avenue as part of their off-site upgrade requirements. Leaving the water main replacement to a later date will require repairing the existing water main in several locations as the new sanitary and storm infrastructure crosses under the water main at 5 locations. The AC, or asbestos cement pipe, is particularly vulnerable when disturbed. Each of the 5 crossings will require removal and repair of small sections of the existing asbestos cement water main. The resulting work will cause several interruptions to the residential water supply on Moss Avenue. So to avoid these interruptions, staff are recommending adding the water main replacement to the developer's off-site works. Now, funding for the water main replacement on Moss Avenue is already in the approved 2018 capital upgrade budget. Staffs have received and reviewed the quotes from the engineer of record and the contractor for their work, their potential work, and we find that the quotes represent good value for the city, and our recommendations as are the report.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Frass. Any conversation? Any discussion? Councillor O'Brien?
Through your worship, to the Director of Engineering, I would just like to say congratulate you on having the foresight to consider this at this time while we're already ripping up Moss Avenue. It shows great foresight, and it's going to save the city in the long run a lot of money. And I know what working with AC pipe is like, so well done. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Mrs. Keller, you're up.
Thank you.
Would you please give us the background on the issue regarding Community Park mobile vending?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For several years, the city has been issuing requests for proposals, or RFPs, to provide seasonal food vending services in the community park. This was done annually while consultation was occurring for the community park master plan. The plan was approved in the fall and contains recommendations for the continuation of food concession services in the park. If council wishes to provide an opportunity for commercial operators to locate in the park, it must provide notice and allow for interested parties to submit bids. Council will then have the opportunity to consider those responses and approve a license of occupation, including the terms, or they could also reject all bids if they considered there were no suitable submissions. If council does not wish to provide food concession services, it would direct staff not to proceed with the RFP. Some food service would still be available and would be provided in conjunction with special event permits in the park. And if council does wish to issue the RFP, staff would suggest the option of entering into longer-term licenses. It could still be left up to the applicants to specify whether they wished that opportunity, and council would be in a position to approve the specific term based on the submissions received to the RFP. It should be noted, however, the deed which granted the parkland to the city contains a prohibition on leases that are longer than 5 years in duration, and recommendations from staff are per the report.
Thank you. I believe we're going to split this one in two as well. So the first one is that the report be received. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Greer and Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. All right. The second part, you have an alternative?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have a motion arising from this issue that the proposed issuance of the request for proposals for the occupation of 2 existing mobile food vendor pads in the community park be deferred until such time as council and staff have undertaken consultation with the Parksville Downtown Business Association.
I need a seconder for that motion. So, Councillor Chandler is seconding the motion. Discussion. Any discussion? So what we're proposing from what I'm reading here is that we're deferring this until such time as we can go and talk to the Downtown Business Association and get their input as to the effects to their businesses and so on for this. That's just a definition of it. So, Councillor Pratt.
It's a question for staff, through your worship. What kind of time frame do you think that would take to hear back from the PDBA?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Frass. We can set that up as soon as possible. It would just depend on the schedules of the officials who represent the Downtown Business Association and which members of council would want to be involved in that consultation, whether it's the liaison and the mayor or other representatives of council will take direction on that.
I'd just like to make one comment. I was on council, of course, when we made the concession booth into washrooms, and we took on these food trucks. I thought it was a mistake then, and I voted against it. And I think still, in the future, we should look at a concession, a proper concession for our park. I don't like the looks of these food trucks in general in our park, and I think a concession would be welcome down there, so that we know exactly what we're getting on it as far as the menu goes on a day-to-day basis. So I think in the future somehow we've got to get back to having a concession for our park. Thanks.
Councillor O'Brien.
We may be deferring it, but I still have questions regarding the food truck contract agreement, and maybe if I can address staff, if I may at this time, through your worship, to the appropriate staff. It's the current contract allows for what it's saying is a rental income of $28,610 per year on this. Now, I would understand that the food trucks have access to 30 amp electrical service as well as water provided to the food trucks at the double pads. Is there an electrical panel there, the electrical panel with a meter on it that suggests or records how much electricity is actually being used by those food trucks, as well as the Director of Engineering will attest to this in the very near future, the water used anywhere in the city is going to have a price tag on it because we know what it's going to cost to run it through the treatment process. So the thing is that is there also a water meter to measure water consumption? Because in the past, food trucks in other cities and other locations, wherever I've traveled and so forth, are independent. And I mean independent, which means they provide their own water, they provide their own power or gas or whatever it is to heat their product. In this particular case, they have a 30 amp service provided to them. So I think it's somewhat misleading to say that we're making a rental income of $28,000 that they're actually getting free power. BC Hydro is not cheap, nor is our water going to be. So the thing is that this is actually coming at another cost to the city. So I think that's got to be out there, and I'm not sure how the garbage pickup works on that. I understand how much garbage is produced by a food truck, and I understand they're required to do a sweep of the area, which is great as per the contract, but at the same time, are the garbage containers in the park, are the food trucks using those, and are they picked up by our city park staff, which I understand from the background information here, say that they have to do more pickups when the food trucks are in operation, of course, because there's more garbage. Garbage is also another cost that has to be disposed of and gotten rid of, and there doesn't seem to be a recycling commitment on any of the garbage that's going in here. So my question is that do they pay anything for power, water, or garbage removal?
Okay, I'm going to interject here for a second, only because those are great questions and they should be answered before we make a final decision, but I'm going to need you to shut your mic.
Yeah.
I have the same problem. But I think before we make that decision, the first step here, the motion here is whether we want to defer long enough to go and talk to the Downtown Business Association and get their feedback first. And then we can have the rest of that conversation. We can bring that up at the following meeting, if at that point in time, if you wish. Does that make sense to be able to do it that way? Okay. Councillor Chandler. Oh, okay, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment. I'd like to also recommend that we talk to the current operator managing that process too as well, just get some feedback on what sort of things that they're doing there and so on. So I think that might be worthwhile, as well as the PDVA. Obviously, both those people are heavily involved in the process, I believe. So.
Councillor Frasman, Councillor O'Brien.
Just thinking about, just thinking about if we're going to be looking to get some feedback from PDVA, what the outcome of that would be if we're talking about not renewing the contract or so on in the meantime. when I think about not having concessions in the park, I think that would be a big fail on our part if we go a season without having it. So I think maybe that perhaps this term of being a 3-year term in the meantime, maybe reducing it. We have it currently, it's in line with that each year it gets renewed. So maybe keeping it at 1 year for this time while we reevaluate what might it be in the future, or getting that feedback from Chamber or from the PDBA. But I would hate to see us defer this so long that we miss out on the opportunity of getting an RFP in and having some kind of vendors, because there won't be a brick and mortar concession down there this summer, if that was even the wishes of council to go that direction. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned about delaying it for too long.
Councillor O'Brien.
I agree with that, the comments from Councillor Franz, because the thing is that I'm not really sure what the context of the conversation with PDBA is going to be anyways. The food trucks have been there and they've been approved and so forth, whether we like them or not, they're there, and they've been operating under contract somewhat successfully for the last few years. So I'm not sure what that conversation looks like with PDBA, other than the fact that if we include PDBA, I think it's incumbent upon us to talk about the current operator of those contracts. I would like their input at the same time as well as the PDBA. So with that in mind, I just don't want it to be just perhaps the liaison for the PDBA and maybe your worship itself. I think that should be an entire council decision so that we can ask the questions that I just asked. And I certainly don't reflect my questions to be that I want to have this contract ever turned down. I just want to recognize that all of us have to realize what it is that we're actually approving here. But I certainly don't want it to ever squash like for the 2019 season at all. So speed is of the essence.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may make a suggestion for council's consideration, staff could reach out to both the Chamber and the PDBA reps and invite them to attend the February 20th meeting of council. That will be happening at Belinas, but that might be a way for council to, similar to a delegation process, to ask questions or have a conversation with those two parties. And that would not delay things unnecessarily. We would still be in a position to have the RFP out by the end of February should council want to proceed with that.
Well, to go along with that thought process, because I was just thinking it through, that my hope was that to address all the concerns here is that we put this to bed on the 20th meeting. So somewhere between now and the 20th, we do meet with the Chamber and with the downtown PB. I mean, the reason that this is being brought up is because at some point in time during the last few years, there's been a number of people that have said that they want to have a say about what's going on. So let's give them we have been talking about transparency and listening to the people. So my thinking is, let's listen to what they have to say. And at the end of the day, from both sides, I don't have a problem with that. From both sides, let's hear what, and then to address your questions on the 20th would be a fair statement. And then we can make the final decision on the 20th and call it a day. Councillor Chandler, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I think it's very important just knowing the food truck groups. It's important because they're doing all their planning. There needs to be scheduling put together. It's a cumbersome process, so it's definitely speed of the essence scenario. So I agree with that.
No, I can't make a friendly amendment. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
Through your mayor, if I may, would it be possible to have them make the presentation in the committee of the whole before the February 20th? Committee of the whole to all council, and then it's not going to encumber the February 20th Belinas meeting. Is committee of the whole possible? Could it happen in that format?
Anything is possible.
I love that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For me, through you to Councillor O'Brien, we can go into committee of the whole at any time based on a motion of council, like a resolution of council, so we can certainly do that for the discussion, if you wish, at Belinas. And if I might suggest, we could, at this point, consider a friendly amendment to add the chamber and then defer recommendation number 2 to that meeting on the 20th.
In the meantime, to Councillor O'Brien's request, and I think it's a valid one, we should schedule a COW somewhere between now and the 20th where we can have, okay, that's what he was asking, yeah. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, we can set up a special meeting at a convenient time for council. We'll poll everybody to see when that would work.
Okay. So, somebody has to make that amendment. Okay. All right. Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Any discussion on the amendment? So that's the somewhere between now and then, we asked both groups to have the conversation. We can do it individually or together. It's up to the. All right. I'm calling the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? It's carried. Now on the amended motion, I would like any discussion on that. All right, I'll call the question then. All those in favor of the amended motion. Thank you. Mrs. Keeler, please give us the background on the issue regarding community park commercial use policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In previous years, Council has advertised the opportunity to provide for sports and recreational equipment rentals from the hovercraft site at Arbutus Point. There has been varied success for operators based in part on the relative isolation of this area and also on other factors which are beyond anyone's control, such as the tides and weather conditions. As Council is aware, the park is extremely busy during the summer months. There are other options for equipment rentals as are outlined in the report, including at least one option where this service is provided by a commercial business in the downtown core. Staff can proceed with issuing an RFP and see if there is interest from any operators in locating at the point for this season, or Council may wish to wait until the infrastructure is upgraded at the gathering place. This was recommended in the Community Park Master Plan, which may allow for rentals to be located at the western end of the park without creating undue congestion during the busiest times. Recommendations from staff are per the report.
I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. First off, that the report be received and that the recreational use policy be repealed, and then secondly, that once a gathering space has been created, staff direct to revisit a commercial recreation. So basically, you're just repealing at this point in time, you're repealing the original policy. So you're moving it. Seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Sorry, it was moved by Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? Councillor O'Brien.
My only concern is, would this eliminate any chances for an RFP if the gathering place is not in play here? Because any RFPs are going to be received rather soon now, and I'm not confident that the gathering place is going to be finished at that time. So if there's anybody that wants to set up a rental for stand-up paddle boards or kayaks or something, they're going to be hard-pressed to see what they're presenting. I understand what they're talking about, being out of the position down at the hovercraft pad. But the thing is that if they could split some of their operation, I'm just a little concerned from what, like, I haven't seen plans for the gathering place yet. I would really like to, and I've asked, but I haven't got them back to me yet. So the thing is that if we're going to suggest that the gathering places are going to be in the area of around the food trucks, from what I gather and so forth, and right near the Lions Park, or the playground, to suggest that we could put in also a rental program in there where you're renting out stand-up paddleboards and kayaks. They're big and bulky, and they're going to be knocking people over, and it's going to be like a Three Stooges movie, you know, to try and get the people safely out to the beach. So I would suggest that maybe they could do a split location whereby as the SUPs or kayaks are located on the hovercraft pad, and maybe he can have a little kiosk in the gathering place or something like that. Might make it a little more effective and safe, but I really believe that we need this, and we have lots of requests for it. And I do understand about the rental already up in town, but I think that he was hoping to be closer to the beach in the first place. So I want to make sure that we get this in play for the 2019 season, which is coming up really fast. So I'm not sure that, what I'm saying is I'm not sure that the gathering place is going to be done at that point. Could we at least give in the RFP the option of putting up a kiosk where the gathering place is going to be for an operator, and as well let them store, or not store, let them use the hovercraft pad for their supplying of the material. Just a thought.
Any other discussion? Councillor Greer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would support that idea of having something on the beach. I think if it's off the beach to any distance at all, it doesn't work. I think anything that we have on the beach as far as paddle boards go, it should be right on the beach so it's easy access.
Any other discussion?
Can you just clarify what the motion is that's on the floor right now?
That we repeal the recreational use policy number 3.34, and that once a gathering space has been created, staff be directed to revisit the commercial recreational use policy in the community park. So it's not saying what Councillor O'Brien said, but go ahead.
So I guess just with that in mind, I support what Doug is saying there. I'd like to see the activities maintained in the park in the meantime until we know what the next step may be.
Just before, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would suggest that if council is not in favor of the recommendation made by staff, that they could defeat that motion and then raise another motion for consideration that does address what Councillor O'Brien was saying, essentially issuing an RFP that would permit an operator in a location different than the hovercraft. So it would be an amended policy that staff would come back with, and an RFP that would actually allow for this use this year.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Directed to our CAO. If we removed Section 2 of this recommendation, would that bring everything back around again?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Patterson, I think we would have to defeat number 3 also. This motion or this recommendation from staff was really to not issue the RFP this year and repeal the policy because it does speak specifically to the use being at the hovercraft site, and we had a lot of concerns from previous operators over the years that just wasn't really the best site. And then the reason why staff recommended not allowing it until the gathering space was put in is because we don't really have the infrastructure like a paved area or a suitable site that wouldn't be damaged from a lot of the congestion that we envisioned happening from that area. And as Councillor O'Brien very humorously painted the picture of just a lot of activity with very large equipment, we thought there might be some conflict there. But I would recommend that this basically be defeated in its entirety and we kind of start again with what council would like to see if that's the case.
I'd be glad to call the question. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? All those against? What a surprise. Okay, thank you. It was defeated. So we'll send you back to the drawing table, so to speak.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, if council would like this to proceed for this season, they could make a motion right now that would actually have us issue the RFP as we have in previous years, and we would then also amend the policy, and we could very quickly bring the policy back for council's consideration so it wouldn't delay, and then by the end of the month we could issue the RFP and have this underway.
So what I'm understanding is that if we bring this back now, is what you're suggesting, then we're back to the hovercraft for, am I missing something here?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, perhaps I'll make a suggested motion that a councillor could support if they wished. We could amend the policy as it is written to permit some flexibility on the location based on council's approval, and then we could, staff could bring that policy back on the 20th for confirmation, and then staff could be directed to issue the RFP by the end of February so that somebody would be in a position to provide this service for the 2019 season.
That's fine, because I would be opposed to talking about the hovercraft as the place for it for a number of reasons. But if this is what we can do and we can come up with an alternative site, I'm more than willing to have that conversation. So you're moving, Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. We've talked this to death, so if there's no other discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor? Good compromise. All right, you're doing well so far.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the ongoing policy review requested by Council, this staff report outlines potential amendments to the existing bylaw enforcement policy. The proposed amendments clarify when bylaw compliance officers would take a more proactive approach rather than waiting for complaints to be submitted from members of the public. It is important, however, for staff to have council direction on priorities for which the officers would be taking this more proactive approach. It is likely that the decision to proactively pursue enforcement may be met with mixed reactions, depending which side of the issue a resident falls on. Some will not be happy to receive proactive action, where others will be happy that they did not have to make a complaint to see the matter resolved. It should be noted that the officers currently use discretion on whether to issue tickets immediately or pursue a more voluntary compliance approach with an individual. And it would be typical for officers to issue warnings rather than tickets, especially in a situation like this where there's a change in the regulations or a change in policy. Recommendations for an amended policy are contained in a draft attached to the staff report, and staff respectfully request that Council consider this as their priority options.
I need a mover and a seconder for the motion. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Greer. Discussion. Now it's getting easier. Very good. All right. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Great. All right. Bylaws. Third reading has been brought to my attention that Council would like to address these two bylaws separately. I can do that. As a result, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation of the first bylaw, which is Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018 number 2000.119, a map amendment to SLR 1 for 331 and 343 Molliette Street South. And that one, the recommendation is that the Zoning Development Amendment Bylaw be read for a third time. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Discussions. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the public hearing, I heard the landowner speak about this development, and I have concerns about the density of the proposed site. The developer suggested that rooftop decks would be suitable for children to play in for gardens, but this is not necessary in Parksville. I'm concerned about a lack of green space to make this a livable development for the people who will actually move in here. The developer could consider dedicating one lot to green space to allow for a children's play area and for pets and other amenities. I understand the landowner is required to obtain a development permit in the future, and I would like to put the developer on notice that I will be closely reviewing the landscaping and overall form and character of the proposal to ensure that I am happy with the provision of suitable green space. So that being said, I guess this would be all right for me to to accept this bylaw if the rest of council would like to do this, but only as a specific zoning, is it? Site-specific zoning, just for this particular project only, and others be looked at on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Sorry, I was listening to Councillor. Go ahead.
I think Councillor Wilson is in part referring to the next bylaw.
Yes,
also.
I understand that, and we'll get to that one. This one is for this site, and from what I'm understanding, Councillor Wilson, you're in favor of passing this particular one, is what you said. You have some reservations, but I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. So if you're okay with it, that's fine.
I do have a few, but I think I've said what my
All right.
reservations are, Mr.
That's
Mayor.
fair.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation of zoning and development amendment bylaw number 2018, number 2000.120, the text amendment to the SLR1 zone. Recommendation zoning and development amendment bylaw 2018, number 2000.120 be read a third time. Before we go into motion, would the Director of Planning like to make any comments on this based on our conversations?
If I may, Your Worship, I just would like to use the opportunity to clarify, a couple of points that were made at the public hearing. The proposed change in the minimum parcel size where you can have a carriage house does not impact the minimum parcel size of this zone. So this zone has a minimum parcel size of 300 square meters. All that is this text amendment is intended to do is changing the threshold when you could have a suite within the unit. So right now, to have either a suite or a carriage house, the minimum parcel size of that lot is 560. However, just a single family residence could be on the lot at 300. The proposed amendment will change the dimensions for where you can have a suite within the dwelling to the 449 square meters. And I should also clarify that it's not happening citywide. It's happening to just those lands that are zoned SLR1, both presently zoned SLR1 or properties that come in for application in the future where council may consider them on a case-by-case basis whether or not to grant an SLR1 zone or whether or not to put in place extra restrictions on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Now I need a mover and a seconder for this. Moved by Councillor O'Brien, second by Councillor Greer. Discussion. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Director of Planning, I just wanted to clarify that when we had a conversation this afternoon, so my motion may not be necessary then, what we were talking about, doing this on a case-by-case basis, so it really won't be impacted, is what you're saying, across the city? I guess I misunderstood.
If I may, Your Worship, I believe an impression is being given that this designation, this change would apply to all single-family properties within the city of Parksville, and that is not what this bylaw amendment would do. This bylaw amendment would only affect those properties that have SLR1 zoning. So that would be like Parkside Place, the Eagle Terrace area, I'm trying to remember a couple of them. There's 4 or 5 areas within this city that are small lots where this may change the regulations. But to also point out, many of the properties in those developments are actually still too small to have a secondary suite in spite of the proposed change.
Do you have a follow-up?
I did. I want to thank Director of Planning. I guess I didn't quite get that. I wrote down all those places, so I understand what you're saying. So thank you for clarifying that for me.
Councillor O'Brien.
And Your Worship, I would just like to comment that I will be supporting this motion for the fact that it's going to provide additional secondary suites and reasonable priced accommodation that is much needed in this community. So I think the following recommendations are going to be a welcome relief to provide more affordable rentals in our city. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. New business. Does any member of council have any new business? Let's try to keep it to the actual new business rather than what's going on in the world today. Okay, only because of the time frame. All right.
Thank you, Mayor, to Acting CAO Kiva Keller. I just wanted to reignite the interest in speaking about the information back from the city on the anti-panhandling bylaw. I know that that was proposed by Councillor O'Brien some time back. I just wanted to ensure that we were working forward on that, and we had talked about that at that point. So,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Chandler. So staff prepared a very detailed draft amendment bylaw based on what we perceive to be the wish list from council, and we submitted that to our legal counsel about 2 weeks ago, asking them to provide feedback on all of those items and what we can and can't do through the Community Charter and Local Government Act. And I just followed up with our solicitor on Thursday last week, and they said that we would have everything in time for the March 4th meeting of council, given our deadlines to have the reports written. They are doing a very thorough review of some bylaws that have been passed in other communities with respect to setbacks and prohibiting it on certain streets. So we provided sidewalk widths to our solicitor just to indicate the land use conflicts that can arise. We provided some mapping and some potential wording that we would like to put in the bylaw so that we ensure we're on the best footing moving forward. We also reached out through the bylaw compliance department to bylaw compliance departments in Kamloops and Courtenay and one other city, which I think was North Van, to see how they actually operationalized their bylaws. We wanted to ensure that the bylaw isn't just great on paper, but it actually works for the officers who are out there each day. One of the other things that we have instituted at the Mayor's request and at the compliance and great support from the RCMP is we currently have twice a week shared foot patrols in the downtown core with one of the bylaw officers and Staff Sergeant Pelletier, and they're recording and tracking any of the issues that come up at that time so that we could feed it into that bylaw process also. So that's been going on for 2 weeks now. So we are anticipating having a very detailed report with amendments to the traffic bylaw, which is how we're proposing to do it, in March.
Just as a follow-up to that, and then I'll give you the follow-up, Councillor Champ. This is actually quite a significant piece of bylaw that we're going to be putting in. In fact, I would venture to guess it's going to be a leading bylaw for all the communities around. Hopefully, if the lawyers see fit that it's going to meet with all their requirements, I think we could have some very strong bylaws that we can enforce, and that would be a real nice treat. So from that perspective, I appreciate staff's, and I know it's been very arduous to get this all in and done. It's a big job. Councillor Chandler.
thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to CEO Councillor, or CEO Kiva Keller. I should have known that that you had everything under control, and I applaud you for the extra aspect of having bylaw and the police doing the foot patrols. I think that's an excellent piece to add to this, so thank you.
Anything else from anybody? All right, moving right along. Does anybody have any notices of motion for the next meeting? Oh, wow. All right, I quit. Special business. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation of pursuant to Section 91C and G of the Community Charter, Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items relating to labor and litigation? I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Greer, second by Councillor Chandler.